Nancy laid beside her newly found man, their eyes lost in each other's warm embrace. They had just had a nice time, even though but she craved a good life more than anything. Before we continue, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. It really helps our channel grow and reach more story lovers. Nancy stretched her legs across the soft cream couch, the late afternoon sun pouring through the curtains and bathing the room in a golden glow. The air smelled of freshly squeezed oranges and her favorite vanilla candle. She swirled the last bit of juice in her glass and let a sly smile play across her lips. The thought that had been turning in her mind all day made her chest feel light with excitement. If I marry him, he's already in his 80s, she murmured to herself, her voice soft but full of meaning. If I marry him now, it's just a matter of a few years before I inherit everything once he's gone. She tilted her head back and let the idea settle, almost tasting the future it promised. Nancy had always believed she was meant for something bigger than the life she was born into. Luxury wasn't just a dream, it was her birthright, something she deserved simply for being who she was, beautiful, charming, and clever. But hard work? The thought made her wrinkle her nose. Why would she waste time learning a trade or chasing a job when her looks and confidence opened doors faster than any certificate could? She pictured herself in a workshop covered in dust or standing for hours in a market stall and shuddered. No, she whispered with a little laugh. That life is not for me. I am a baby girl. Men have been working for decades just so I can enjoy. She reached for her phone and scrolled lazily through her social feeds, pausing at photos of women dressed in designer gowns, sipping cocktails on foreign beaches. That was the life she wanted, the life she deserved. She could almost hear the sound of waves on a private island, the flash of cameras when she stepped out of a luxury car. I will not settle for anything less, she told herself firmly. I only hang out with real men who can spend. The sudden buzz of her phone broke the quiet. She glanced at the screen and smiled when she saw the name. Vera, her best friend, her partner in adventure, the one person who truly understood her. Hey, babe. Vera's bright voice filled the room the moment Nancy answered. Listen, there's a new nightclub in town. A friend invited me. He's a guy I just met recently and he said his friends will be coming too. I want us to go there tonight. Nancy sat up straighter, her heart giving a little skip. The slow, lazy evening she had planned suddenly felt dull. Wow, babe, let's go, she said quickly, excitement rising in her voice. I'm in. What time should we meet? 10 o'clock, Vera replied without hesitation. It's going to be lit. Dress hot. These guys are not small boys, oh. They know how to spend. A grin spread across Nancy's face. Say no more. You know me, I'll bring the fire. They both giggled, their laughter mixing with the soft music playing from Nancy's speaker. After the call ended, Nancy placed her phone on the glass table and leaned back again, her mind already spinning with thoughts of what to wear. She imagined the club-coloured lights flashing, music thumping like a heartbeat, men in expensive watches and tailored suits watching her every move. The thought made her pulse quicken. Tonight could be the night she met someone new, someone powerful and rich enough to fit the life she envisioned. Nancy drained the last drop of her orange juice and stood, her bare feet sinking into the thick rug. She walked toward her wardrobe, her mind dancing with possibilities. Dresses of silk and satin waited like old friends. She touched each one, already picturing how it would shimmer under club lights. This is my world, she whispered, a small smile curving her lips. This is the life I was made for. The sun dipped lower outside, painting the room with shades of orange and pink. Nancy's heart beat a little faster. The night had only just begun. The moment Nancy and Vera stepped through the glowing entrance of the club, the music softened for just a second, or so it seemed. Heads turned. Men paused mid-conversation. Women looked them over from head to toe. Nancy felt the weight of their eyes and loved every second of it. The lights above caught the shimmer of her red dress, making her appear almost royal. She lifted her chin slightly, walking with a slow, graceful sway. Beside her, Vera smiled knowingly. "Told you we'd own this place," she whispered over the beat of the drums. Nancy smirked. "Let them stare." Vera tilted her head toward the raised VIP section draped in golden curtains. "That's him," she said, eyes gleaming. "Anthony. Owns several businesses in Lagos. He's been buying me gifts all week. Let's go say hi." Nancy's heart gave a small leap as she followed Vera. The stairs to the VIP area glowed under soft lights, and the scent of expensive cologne filled the air. At the top, a group of well-dressed men lounged around a glass table, bottles of champagne chilling in buckets of ice. Anthony sat at the center like a king. His tailored white kaftan fit perfectly, and a silver chain rested lightly on his chest. When he looked up and saw Vera, his face brightened. Then his gaze shifted and landed on Nancy. For a brief moment, his eyes lingered, curious and warm. "Who's she?" he asked, his voice smooth as music. "This is Nancy," Vera said quickly, her own smile wide. Anthony extended his hand, a confident grin spreading across his face. "Pleasure to meet you, Nancy. You're as beautiful as the morning Sunday." Nancy felt a rush of heat to her cheeks. "Thank you, Anthony. I've heard a lot about you." The men made room for the two women, and soon laughter filled the section like a familiar song. Waiters brought more drinks, plates of grilled meat, and sparkling water. Anthony leaned close to Nancy as he spoke about his ventures real estate in Victoria Island, a chain of restaurants in Lekki, a logistics company that stretched across West Africa. Nancy listened carefully, laughing softly at his jokes, nodding at the right times. She let her eyes shine with admiration, just enough to feed his pride. Each time Anthony snapped his fingers, another bottle of champagne appeared, and the table glowed with wealth. The hours passed in a blur of music and bright lights. Vera danced beside the table, her bracelets jingling, while Anthony and his friends showered them with attention. Nancy could feel eyes from the main floor still watching her, but she no longer cared. Her focus had narrowed to Anthony, the way his deep voice carried power, the way he gestured with easy authority. By the time the DJ announced the final set, Nancy knew she had found her next target. Anthony's compliments had turned softer, more personal. He whispered that someone as stunning as her deserved the best of everything. When the night finally ended, he pressed a crisp bundle of notes into Vera's hand and another into Nancy's, insisting on covering their ride home. Outside, the cool night air brushed Nancy's skin like a reward. She clutched the small envelope of cash and imagined what doors it might open. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains of Nancy's small apartment, warming the tiled floor. She stretched lazily on her bed, still hearing the echo of last night's music in her ears. A knock sounded at her door, followed by a familiar voice. "Kiki," Nancy muttered, sitting up. Her cousin stepped inside, her face a mix of concern and exhaustion. Kiki had been living with Nancy for a year now, saving money from her job at a small pharmacy. Her plain cotton dress and neatly tied scarf made her look far older than her 23 years. "You came home so late last night," Kiki said, arms crossed. "Don't you think you're overdoing this lifestyle?" Nancy rolled her eyes and reached for her phone. "Kiki, don't start. I had fun, and that's all that matters." "But for how long, Nancy? You're almost 30, and you don't have anything to show for yourself except designer bags and shoes bought with other people's money." Nancy turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. "Don't be jealous because I'm living the good life." "Jealous?" Kiki scoffed. "I just don't want you to wake up one day and realize you've wasted your life chasing meaningless things. What about a real future? A skill? A business of your own?" "I'm not wasting my life," Nancy said firmly. She stood, letting the red dress from last night slip off her chair. "I'm enjoying it. I know exactly what I'm doing." Kiki shook her head slowly, her voice softening. "You think you know, but happiness built on someone else's pocket doesn't last." Nancy ignored her, scrolling through her phone to find Anthony's number, a small smile tugging at her lips. One Friday night, the air around the city buzzed with weekend excitement. The sky was a deep velvet, scattered with faint stars that flickered like tiny lamps. Nancy and Vera stepped out of the cab in front of a newly opened lounge, the kind of place where the scent of money hung thick in the air. Dressed in their finest outfits, sparkling heels, matching designer handbags, and shimmering makeup, they looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Their laughter carried down the marble steps as they entered the lounge, heads high, confident, and ready to make an impression. The lounge itself was a temple of luxury. Crystal chandeliers dropped from the high ceiling like frozen rain. Velvet seats glowed under soft golden lights. A faint scent of expensive wine and imported perfume lingered in every corner. A live band strummed soft high-life music in the background, the bass notes deep enough to stir the chest. Vera leaned close to Nancy and whispered, her eyes scanning the rich crowd. "This is it, babe. Tonight, we're bagging someone loaded." Nancy's red lips curved into a sly smile. "As long as they've got money, I'm all in." They found a corner table, perfectly placed to view the entire room. A waiter dressed in crisp white brought them tall glasses of cocktails that shimmered like jewels. They sipped slowly, pretending to be casual while their eyes searched for opportunity. Moments later, the door opened again and a different kind of presence swept in. A group of older men entered, walking with deliberate confidence. Their arrival made the younger crowd glance twice. They were not the usual flashy boys in designer sneakers. These men carried a quiet authority. Nancy nudged Vera and tilted her head toward them. "Look at that. That's old money right there." Vera laughed softly. "Old is the word. They must be in their 70s at least. Not really our type, is it?" "Who cares about type when there's money involved?" Nancy replied with a mischievous wink. The men took a table near the center, their agbadas rich with fine embroidery. One wore deep blue silk that caught the light with every movement. Another had a wine-colored fabric that looked as smooth as water. The third, a bald man with a cane, wore a striking white agbada lined with golden embroidery. On his wrist gleamed a heavy gold watch that could have paid a year's rent in some parts of the city. Nancy's eyes narrowed. "That's real wealth," she whispered. Vera sipped her drink, trying to stay cool, but she followed Nancy's gaze. Something about their quiet power was magnetic. They didn't need to shout about their riches. The quality of their clothes, the understated but expensive phones on the table, and the easy way they spoke to the waiters, everything announced success. After a few minutes of soft conversation among themselves, the bald man with the gold watch turned slightly and caught sight of the women. His eyes rested on Vera, and a slow, friendly smile spread across his face. With a subtle motion of his hand, he signaled for them to come over. Nancy raised her brows at Vera, a spark of excitement in her eyes. "Well, look at that. VIP invitation." Vera hesitated. "He looks older than my dad," she whispered, though her pulse quickened. "Relax. It's just a chat," Nancy said, already rising from her seat. Both girls walked gracefully toward the table, their heels clicking softly on the polished floor. The older men watched with quiet amusement as the young women approached. The scent of expensive cologne mingled with the warm notes of whiskey as they drew near. "Good evening, beautiful ladies," the bald man said in a deep, raspy voice. His eyes lingered on Vera, his smile gentle but assured. "My name is Williams. May I know you?" Vera gave a polite smile, but avoided direct eye contact. "Oh, sure, why not?" she said, her voice carrying a nervous edge. Mr. Williams slowly pulled his chair closer to Vera, his movements careful but deliberate. "You have a lovely smile," he said. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the room." Vera's fingers tightened slightly around her cocktail glass. "Thank you," she replied softly. Nancy hid her amusement behind her own drink, watching the scene unfold. She could tell Vera was out of her comfort zone. The other two men, both with neatly trimmed grey beards and quiet, intelligent eyes, struck up easy conversation with Nancy. Their voices were calm and deep, filled with stories of travels, business deals, and memories of Lagos when it was still a quiet city. After a few minutes of polite conversation, it became clear to Nancy that Mr. Williams' attention was locked on Vera. "So, what do you do, Mr. Williams?" Vera asked, her voice light but a little forced. "I'm retired now," he replied, a trace of pride in his eyes. "But I spent decades in the oil and gas business. It was a good life. I've been fortunate enough to live comfortably." He leaned in slightly, his eyes still on her. "But enough about me. Tell me about yourself." Vera shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes darted to Nancy, a silent plea hidden in the quick glance. She wasn't used to being the focus of someone so much older, someone whose life experience stretched decades beyond her own. Nancy caught the signal and decided to have a little fun. She leaned forward with a bright smile. "Mr. Williams, you seem like such a wonderful man." Vera is a little shy, but I know she appreciates your compliments. Vera's eyes widened in surprise, and she nearly choked on her drink. "Nancy," she whispered sharply under her breath, but Nancy only gave her an innocent look, as if she'd said nothing unusual. The other men chuckled quietly, clearly entertained. Mr. Williams smiled, his eyes softening even more. "Shy women are often the most charming," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that made it hard to tell whether he was teasing or sincere. Vera forced a small laugh, trying to regain control of the moment. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. This was not how she imagined the night would go. Nancy, meanwhile, sipped her cocktail with practiced ease, letting the tension play out. She found it amusing to watch her friend struggle to navigate the unexpected attention. At the same time, she couldn't ignore the quiet elegance of these men, the way they carried themselves, the richness in their quiet voices. This wasn't the loud, showy wealth of young men trying to impress. This was something different. The band in the corner shifted into a softer tune, the drums slowing to a gentle rhythm. Around them, the lounge seemed to fade slightly, the golden lights casting a warm glow over the table. Vera cleared her throat and managed a polite question about the music, anything to change the subject. Mr. Williams answered with another slow smile, but he never took his eyes off her. Nancy set her empty glass down, the sound a soft click against the glass table. She leaned back, studying the men, feeling the subtle pull of something she couldn't yet name. Tonight had begun like any other Friday, but she sensed the night carrying a different weight, as if a quiet turning point hovered just beyond their laughter. Vera shifted again, trying to steady her voice as she spoke, and Nancy noticed how Mr. Williams' hand rested lightly on his cane, the gold of his watch catching the chandelier's glow. Something about the image, a man who had clearly lived a full life, now calmly reaching for a new chapter, sent a ripple of curiosity through her. The night stretched on, filled with careful words and the slow rhythm of possibility. Neither Nancy nor Vera could have guessed that this simple encounter, with its soft music and golden lights, would leave a mark deeper than any loud party or quick fling. The air itself seemed to hum with quiet change, though neither girl yet knew what kind of change it would be. The music in the lounge mellowed as the night slipped toward midnight. The older men, their eyes half hidden behind a glow of wealth and whiskey, leaned closer to the girls. Voices grew softer, the air around the table thick with perfume and promise. Mr. Williams rested his cane against the wall and smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. "It's late," he said in a deep, raspy tone. "Why don't we continue this evening somewhere more private?" Nancy's eyes flashed with excitement. She didn't even pause. "Sounds perfect," she said, her voice like honey. Vera, on the other hand, felt her stomach tighten. She shifted in her seat, glancing at Nancy for a lifeline. She began, but Nancy was already leaning closer. A quick tug on Vera's arm pulled her toward a quiet corner. Nancy's face gleamed with determination. "Babe, this is what we've been praying for," she whispered fiercely. "These men will change our lives. Stop being dramatic." Vera crossed her arms, her heart beating fast. "Nancy, they're old. They're almost like grandfathers to us. This doesn't feel right." "None of them is your grandfather," Nancy snapped, lowering her voice. "Don't ruin this lucky night for us, girl. Let's use our beauty to get the opportunity we deserve. Remember, it only comes once." Vera looked down at her sparkling heels, unsure. But the thought of the expensive lounge, the crystal chandeliers, and the quiet power in Mr. Williams' eyes pressed against her hesitation. Nancy's hand squeezed hers with silent insistence. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Vera nodded. "That's my girl," Nancy said with a triumphant smile. Outside, sleek black cars waited at the curb, their engines purring. Drivers in crisp uniforms opened doors with practiced grace. Nancy slid into the back seat beside a tall man with salt and pepper hair, Mr. Ade, the one who had chosen her. Vera followed another driver toward a separate car where Mr. Williams waited, his cane resting across his knees like a silent companion. The convoy of cars moved smoothly through the quiet city streets, heading toward a destination the women had only ever heard about in whispers: the Royal Crest Hotel. When they arrived, the sight nearly took Vera's breath away. The towering glass building glittered like a jewel against the night sky. Golden lights traced every edge, and a fountain danced in the front courtyard, throwing sprays of water that caught the moonlight. "This is heaven on earth," Nancy whispered as the driver opened her door. Inside, the lobby smelled of roses and rich polish. The floor was pure marble, smooth as still water, reflecting the chandeliers above. Discreet attendants bowed slightly as they passed, their movements quiet and efficient. Nancy's heart soared. She had imagined places like this while flipping through magazines, but to be here in person was like stepping into a dream. Soon, the girls were led to separate suites on the top floor, each more extravagant than anything they'd ever seen. Gold-lined curtains swayed softly in the breeze of hidden air conditioners. Plush carpets sank beneath their feet. The rooms glowed with a warm, luxurious light. Nancy's night unfolded like a scene from a movie. Mr. Ade, though older, moved with a surprising energy. He praised her beauty, showered her with attention, and ordered room service as though the entire hotel belonged to him. The wine was rich, the food endless, and the compliments constant. When the door finally closed and the night deepened, Nancy let herself slip fully into the fantasy. She gave herself over to the moment, believing each soft word he whispered. By the time they lay back on the enormous bed, she felt a kind of triumph she had only dreamed of. Across the hall, Vera's experience was different. She sat stiffly on the edge of the bed, her nerves dancing like restless birds. Mr. Williams moved slowly, with the deliberate care of a man who had learned patience over decades. His voice was gentle, almost fatherly, and he spoke of art, old music, and the Lagos of his youth. When he finally touched her hand, Vera felt a tremor of uncertainty. She hesitated, but something in his calm presence kept her from pulling away completely. The night passed quietly, and though she finally allowed him to hold her, her heart never settled. She felt like a visitor in a world she wasn't sure she wanted to enter. It was well past 3 in the morning when Vera stirred. A faint sound pricked her ears, a soft rustle, like cloth brushing against stone. She opened her eyes slowly and froze. In the faint glow of the bedside lamp, Mr. Williams stood near the corner of the suite. A red wrapper was tied tightly around his waist, and in his hands he held a small black calabash. He was eating something from it, his movements slow and precise, as if following a ritual. The sight chilled her to the bone. Vera's mind raced. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she thought she might cry out, but fear held her silent. She forced herself to remain still, her eyelids lowered just enough to watch. Mr. Williams finished the contents of the calabash with deliberate care. He then walked to a narrow locker in the corner, opened it quietly, and placed the empty vessel inside. The soft click of the door echoed unnaturally loud in the silent room. He turned back toward the bed, his face calm as ever. Slowly, he slipped under the covers and lay beside her. Leaning close, he placed on her forehead. The touch sent a chill racing down her spine. She kept her breathing slow and even, pretending to be asleep while her mind screamed. The night stretched endlessly. Every minute felt like an hour. She stared at the darkness behind her eyelids, waiting for the first hint of dawn. At last, a pale light touched the curtains. Morning had come. Vera sat up quickly, her heart pounding. She grabbed her handbag and shoes, trying not to make a sound. The movement woke Mr. Williams. His voice was calm, almost affectionate. "Oh, I thought you were going to spend the weekend with me," he said, rubbing his eyes. "I'm sorry, sir," Vera replied, her voice careful. "I have an appointment at 9 this morning. You have my contact, you can always reach me." Before he could answer, she pressed her phone to her ear as though taking a call and hurried toward the door. She didn't look back. The hallway outside smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume, but she barely noticed. Her only thought was escape. She called Nancy the moment she stepped into a cab, but her friend didn't pick up. Vera didn't dare leave a message. How could she explain what she had seen without sounding foolish or worse, paranoid? When she finally reached her small apartment, she closed the door behind her and leaned against it, heart still thudding. She wanted to tell someone, anyone, but the words felt heavy and unreal. Hours later, Nancy arrived, glowing with satisfaction. She tossed her designer handbag onto the sofa and stretched like a cat. "Why would you leave in such a hurry?" Nancy asked, her voice full of teasing surprise. "I was hoping you'd stay with Mr. Williams. We could have spent the whole weekend there." Ade just wanted a one-night thing. "He gave me 1 million naira and said he's travelling. I guess he only wanted a quick fling." Vera stared at her, words trapped in her throat. The memory of the red wrapper and the black calabash burned in her mind, too strange to share and too vivid to forget. Nancy didn't even let Vera finish her sentence. "Babe, you really mess up, oh," she exclaimed, her voice sharp with excitement. "You see a big fish like that and you deform, holy?" Vera opened her mouth to explain, but before a single word escaped, her phone chimed a loud, cheerful beep. Both girls froze. Vera glanced at the screen and her heart jumped. 5 million naira. Her eyes widened as she read the credit alert. "Oh my God," she whispered. 5 million. Nancy snatched the phone from her hand and stared at the message like it was a miracle. "Jesus. Babe, we don blow. This is it, jackpot. Finally, we can roll with the big girls. Designer clothes, elegant hair, trips abroad. God is good." She squealed, bouncing on the couch like a child. Vera's fingers trembled as she took the phone back. The numbers glowed against the screen. Unreal. She wanted to tell Nancy about the strange thing she had witnessed, the red wrapper, the black calabash, the eerie midnight ritual, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she swallowed hard and murmured, I don't even want him. I won't see him again." Nancy threw her head back and laughed. A bright, ringing sound. "Babe, stop that talk. Make sure you hold this man very tight. Oh, you're so lucky. Let's use our body to get that big bag. This is what we've been waiting for." Vera shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, I don't want us to meet them anymore. Those men are way too old. Let's focus on younger guys." Her words fell into the room like feathers, soft and light, easy to ignore. Nancy barely reacted, still grinning as she imagined a new wardrobe and sparkling shoes. Days passed. The following weekend arrived with heavy clouds and an uneasy breeze. Vera tried to distract herself with errands, determined to forget Mr. Williams and his unsettling midnight habits. She hadn't called him, hadn't replied to his few short messages, but late Saturday evening, as she folded laundry, her phone buzzed again. Beep. Vera's stomach tightened. She reached for the phone with hesitant fingers. 3 million naira. This time the transfer came with a note. "For your weekend, my baby girl." Her breath caught. The air around her felt suddenly thick. When she told Nancy, the reaction was explosive. "This is madness. In a good way, Nancy shouted, almost dancing around the small living room. He just day-dash you money like Sena water. Babe, you no even need to see Am again. Just keep enjoying the blessings. Vera sat quietly, the glow of the phone screen reflecting in her worried eyes. The money kept coming, even after she'd said no. Each alert was sweeter than the last, and yet it filled her with a creeping fear, because deep inside, she knew gifts like these never came free. Nancy's new life had unfolded like a dream she never wanted to wake from. It began the night she slept over at Vera's apartment. When Vera finally drifted into deep sleep, Nancy tiptoed across the room, careful not to wake her cousin. Vera's phone lay on the side table, glowing faintly. Nancy picked it up with trembling hands, scrolling quickly until she found the name she sought, Mr. Williams. Her heart pounded as she copied the number into her own phone. The thrill of the theft sent a shiver through her. Before dawn, she slipped quietly back to her own place, rehearsing lines in her head. The next day, she summoned the courage to send a simple text. "Hello, Mr. Williams. This is Nancy, Vera's cousin. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Minutes later, a reply came. "Not at all. How are you?" That was all the opening Nancy needed. She began weaving soft lies about Vera, how ungrateful she was, how she gossiped behind his back. By the time she finally called him, the story had taken on a life of its own. To Nancy, it felt like magic when Mr. Williams laughed warmly and invited her to dinner. From that night, the affair moved swiftly. Mr. Williams spent on her as if money were leaves falling from a tree. Designer dresses, glittering jewelry, wads of cash, everything arrived without effort. Nancy played her romantic game like a professional, convinced she had outsmarted everyone, especially Vera. But she never imagined why Mr. Williams had welcomed her so easily. Weeks passed. Nancy's secret life grew brighter while her friendship with Vera dimmed. Vera noticed the sudden flood of luxury new bags, a sleek silver car, but each time she asked. Nancy smiled and told another polished lie. Then came the Monday morning that cracked everything open. Nancy returned home after a weekend with Mr. Williams, humming to herself as she dropped her bag on the couch. The air conditioner purred softly, yet sweat dampened her skin. At first, she brushed it off as tiredness from the trip, but soon a heavy heat settled over her body, and a sharp dizziness clouded her eyes. She tried to stand. Her legs buckled. The room tilted like a rocking boat. A strangled gasp escaped her throat as she collapsed onto the cool tiles of the living room. Just then, Kiki walked by, humming a tune. "Jesus! Nancy!" She rushed forward, kneeling beside her cousin. "Nancy, talk to me." Nancy's lips moved, but no sound came. Her eyes fluttered weakly. Panic surged through Kiki. She grabbed her car keys and half-lifted, half-dragged Nancy to the car. Tires screeched as she sped to the nearest hospital. Doctors admitted Nancy immediately, hooking her to IV lines and oxygen. They worked quickly, their voices low and urgent. Kiki waited outside the emergency room, heart pounding. Hours passed before a doctor emerged. "She's stable for now," he said carefully, "but we need to run several tests to find the cause." Blood tests, scans, and examinations followed, yet every result came back normal. Days slipped into a week, then another. Instead of improving, Nancy weakened. Her once radiant skin grew pale, her voice faded to a whisper. Kiki, desperate and exhausted, finally called Vera. Vera arrived breathless, eyes wide with fear. "What happened to her?" "They don't know," Kiki whispered, tears brimming. One test after another, nothing. A month dragged by with no answers. Doctors exchanged worried glances, baffled that a young woman could deteriorate so badly without a single detectable cause. Nancy lay silent on the hospital bed, sweat beading her forehead, while an unspoken dread settled over everyone who loved her. The weeks dragged on like a slow, endless night. Despite every drip, pill, and prayer, Nancy's condition never improved. Her body weakened until she could hardly lift her head. Then, without warning, something far worse began. A sharp, sour smell filled her hospital room one morning. At first, the nurses thought it was the damp sheets or the trash can. They cleaned everything, sprayed disinfectant, even changed her bedding twice. But by the next day, the odor grew stronger, so thick and bitter it clung to every corner of the ward. It was coming from Nancy herself. Nurses bathed her almost every hour. They used scented soaps, special ointments, and strong antiseptics, but nothing helped. The smell rolled back like a dark wave, heavy and foul. Patients in nearby beds began to complain. Families covered their noses when they walked past her room. At last, the head doctor called Kiki aside, his face heavy with worry. "We have tried all we can," he said quietly. "Her tests show nothing, but the odor is beyond our control. We advise that you take her home, maybe seek alternative care." Kiki's heart sank. Home? But she's getting worse. The doctor only lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry, we cannot continue treatment." That evening, they discharged Nancy. She lay limp in the wheelchair, her once radiant skin now ashen, the strange stench clinging to her even after a final hospital bath. Kiki called Vera, who arrived almost in tears. Together, they tried other hospitals in the city, hoping for a miracle. Each one repeated the same story: endless tests, no diagnosis, and finally, polite refusals when the smell became unbearable. Weeks of sleepless nights passed before Kiki whispered the only option left. "We have to take her to the village. Maybe our elders, maybe the herbalists can help." Vera nodded silently. There was nothing else to do. The journey home was long and tense. They drove through dusty roads and quiet farmlands, the car windows open to fight the overpowering odor. Nancy lay in the back seat, eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. At the family compound, her parents gasped when they saw their once beautiful daughter. Her mother's cry pierced the evening air. "What has happened to my child?" The next morning they carried Nancy to the village herbalist. The old man sat cross-legged in his small hut, the smell of burning herbs thick in the air. He watched Nancy carefully, his eyes narrowing. "This is not ordinary," he said at last, voice low and sure. "She has been tampered with spiritually. If you want her to live, she must speak the truth. She must confess who she has been with." A heavy silence settled over the room. Nancy's mother held her daughter's trembling hand. "My child," she whispered, "please, tell us. Who did this to you?" Nancy's lips quivered. At first she looked away, as if the confession might burn her tongue. Finally, in a weak, shaking voice, she said, "It's Mr. Williams, the man I've been seeing." The words sliced through the room like a blade. Vera's heart lurched. "What?" Her voice trembled with anger and disbelief. "Mr. Williams? You mean you were with him?" Nancy nodded faintly, tears streaming down her face. I stole his number from your phone that night. I called him. He believed the lies I told about you. I forced my way into his life. I thought I could have everything." The betrayal hit Vera like a physical blow. Her chest tightened as she remembered the night she'd watched Mr. Williams with the black calabash, the red wrapper tied around his waist. She had kept the secret to herself, hoping it was just a strange dream. Nancy's mother turned sharply on Vera, her grief twisting into rage. She grabbed Vera's blouse with both hands. "Ooh, you are a bad friend," she cried, voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell her? Why keep quiet? You let this terrible thing happen to my daughter." Vera stumbled backward, shocked. Mama, I tried to warn her. I told her those men were too old, too strange. I didn't know she—" "Don't speak!" the woman shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "If you had told me, we would have stopped it. Now, look at my child." Guilt and fury churned in Vera's stomach. She looked from the furious mother to the trembling, sweat-soaked Nancy on the mat. Her best friend had betrayed her trust, stolen her contact, and hidden the truth. Yet here she was, being blamed for everything. The room felt smaller, the air heavy with incense and anger. Vera's eyes burned. Without another word, she pulled free of Nancy's mother's grip. "I have done nothing but care for her," she said quietly. her voice hard. "And you accuse me?" She turned and walked out of the hut, the weight of betrayal and disappointment pressing on her shoulders. Outside, the village air smelled of wood smoke and wet earth, but to Vera it carried the same bitter scent of heartbreak. She did not look back. Vera gripped the steering wheel as the car rolled onto the narrow tarred road leading out of the village. Evening shadows stretched across the fields, but her mind was louder than the hum of the engine. Am I a bad friend for keeping quiet? The question beat like a drum inside her chest. She replayed every moment. Mr. Williams bending over the black calabash, the red cloth tied around his waist, the strange chant she'd heard through the half-open door. She had convinced herself it was none of her business, just a strange scene she could forget. I should have told Nancy. I should have told someone. Her fingers tightened on the wheel. Then another thought struck her like cold water. But even if I spoke, would she have listened? She was already seeing him in secret. Maybe she would have hidden it, maybe even fought me for accusing him. The headlights lit the lonely road ahead, but Vera's mind stayed behind in the dark hut, hearing Nancy's mother's angry voice. "You are a bad friend." The words clung to her like smoke. Should I just let her bear the consequences of her own actions? She wondered. Nancy had chosen deception. Nancy had ignored every warning, yet the image of her friend's pale face and trembling hands would not leave Vera's mind. Another thought pressed in, heavier than the rest. What if I try to reach Mr. Williams? Maybe she could confront him, demand he reverse whatever evil he had done. Maybe there was still a way to break whatever hold he had on Nancy. But the memory of his cold eyes made her shiver. Would he even pick my call? And if he did, what if he turns it on me? The car's engine purred steadily, but inside her head the questions crashed and tumbled. Tell or stay silent? Help or walk away? There was no easy answer. By the time the city lights came into view, her heart was no calmer. She parked outside her apartment and sat for a long moment in the quiet darkness, the key still in the ignition, the echo of her own doubts louder than the ticking clock. Dear viewers, if you were Vera, what would you do? Would you confront Mr. Williams? Or would you let Nancy face the consequences of her choices? This story continues in part 2, so stay tuned to see what happens next.